This show is a screwball comedy with blue humor, adult situations, and some cussing. For subject matter and show notes, visit patterspod.com. The following events are fake. The story, however, is real. Hey, look, you want answers. Me too. So, here's the straight poop on where we stand with everything. I'm looking for Luke Pattersby, and a shady group of authors who call themselves the Children of the Thrill might know where he's gone. Their ringleader is a woman named Tawny Gatherbrook. She wrote such best-selling thrillers as The Dust and Dander Report, printed by none other than Monomyth Publishing, the same book company connected to the disappearance of key witness and all-around whistleblower Fiona Caruso. She's the last person to see Pattersby alive. All this mind hunting has led me now to a coastal beach town where an enterprising eccentric and possible new best friend named Big Wave Dave showed me a mansion owned by Tawny Gatherbrook, where she runs clandestine writers' retreats sponsored by the aforementioned publishing house, Monomyth Publishing. In other words, clues o'clock, a gumshoe's wet dream. And yet, despite all this winning, little did I know I was about to face my greatest test yet. And a bond I thought was as strong as iron would be challenged in ways no mortal could withstand. This is Finding Pattersby, a thriller in 10 parts. Chapter 4, Part 2, Fate's Nickname. Previously on Finding Pattersby.
Luke wasn't alone in that car. She was with him. That damn Fiona Caruso.
Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I wonder if I hadn't channeled something much darker in that mansion.
When you find Mr. Pattersby, you give this to him. I wrote it and I dedicated it to him.
Oh, you don't got writer's block or something, do you? Because back in the day, word got out you had writer's block, oh, they'd take you out back and pow, like a horse.
Yeah, I didn't have it super easy growing up. I mean, who does? A lot of bologna cooked on the stove.
I wanted to go inside.
Inside where?
The fantasy.
You know, funny enough, looking at this Gatherbrook postcard makes me remember how I used to be really big into stamp collecting, like to an unhealthy degree. I mean, I once drained my whole bank account getting a hold of what I later learned to be a counterfeit Alf stamp. Remember Alf? Little furry guy with like a little tummy. It's always just making cracks about the household. One thing you may or may not know about clues is that they mostly come from the garbage. If you're gonna be a detective, it's just one of those things you know. Matter of fact, you dig into some of those early stories of Sherlock Holmes and you'll find a lot of descriptions of the titular Baker Street sleuth smelling like rotten eggs and moldy kippers. Any mind hunter will tell you that when you walk by a waste bin, you're literally walking by the key to 1 million mysteries. And the same holds true for our case. See, my coastal host and partner in crime solving, Big Wave Dave, the beach lawyer, dug around in the trash of Tawny Gatherbrook's suspicious mansion and found a postcard advertising writers' retreats. And
The postcard had a number on it, so he called up the number pretending to be a writer who wanted to go on this writer's retreat. And the voice on the other end told him that before an applicant is selected, potential participants got to pay a nominal fee. But the voice on the other end didn't say how much. And before he could continue, the call was disconnected. He says that the phone number on these postcards is actually no longer in service now. But suffice to say, if people are paying to be at a place as part of a getaway, then in Dave's eyes, that counts as the definition of a short-term rental, which turns out to also be a real bugbear for him. A fixation, if you will. He wants to put a stop to those kinds of things. He thinks short-term rentals have messed with the housing market and messed with rent, kicking out him and his ilk. But his obsession goes far beyond real estate, to a place much closer to Dave's heart and his true motives in all of this. Without prodding any further, he tells me a story, too long for this show, but suffice to say it involves a sunken gambling boat named the Queen Deborah that his great-great-grandpa worked on as a mop boy. And at some point nearly a century ago, that boat went down. And with it, his grandpappy's pocket watch that supposedly has a treasure map engraved on it. I guess it's not too long. All this to say, he feels very strongly that this land where the mansion sits contains the wreckage of the Queen Deborah, and that his grandpappy's remains are buried beneath a magnificent, mysterious abode. He believes under beach law he has a right to excavate, citing some ordinance about ancestral burial as pertains to short-term rental restriction and his grandpappy's wet bones.
Article A, Section 9 clearly states private property only extends to a maximum of 3 feet below sea level. And Queen Deborah over here is a couple of dozen down.
Some light research shows that city locals are, in fact, in an endless battle against second homeowners commandeering spots throughout Portola as investment properties. Suffice to say, Dave's become obsessed with doing whatever it takes to gain access to the place he believes contains his alleged family heirloom.
I should have the right to take this metal detector into the bowels of that mansion to see if I'm correct. But have you guessed what's happened every time I tried?
Cops.
Precisely. And the one thing you gotta know about Big Wave Dave is that he doesn't like sand getting kicked in his puss. Not in this face.
Dave goes on to say that if he can prove the mansion is violating short-term rental laws or beach laws or some kind of shit, honestly, he kind of lost me, but at this point, if even one iota of what this guy's saying is true or has some kind of connection to the Children of the Thrill, I want in. So that's it. Under cover of night, we're going to use an inflatable raft rowboat, the kind you get from Big Five, to paddle out and avoid detection and commit trespassing on this home owned by Tawny Gatherbrook, so Dave can use his metal detector on beachfront property to find a dead relative. And I'm gonna get me some clues. Night falls as we approach our launch point. Dave mentions offhand there's talk of a storm a-brewing, but that we should get to where we're going before any of it comes our way. It strikes me as flippant and certainly not the kind of thing you want to hear before setting sail. I ask him about if we should be worried about sneaker waves after scanning the Wikipedia for going on a boat. He reassures me about this concern in his own very Dave kind of way by completely ignoring the question. As if to say, perish the thought, me hearty. You really think I'd put you in danger? I mean, the hypothetical version of Dave is right. Who do I think he is? Some kind of maniacal Ahab driven by wild obsession? I do try to perish the thought. But IMHO? With talk of a storm, the Wikipedia for going on a boat about sneaker waves continues to loom at the back of my mind like a, sneaker wave. I can't help but look up more and discover the following entry from internet. A sneaker wave, also known as a sleeper wave, or in Australia as a king wave, is a disproportionately large coastal wave that can sometimes appear in a wave train without warning. The term sneaker is popular rather than scientific, derived from the observation that such a wave can sneak up on an unwary beachgoer. There's no scientific coverage of the phenomenon as a distinct sort of wave with respect to height or predictability, as there is on other extreme wave events such as tsunamis or rogue waves. And little or no scientific evidence has been gathered to identify, describe, or define sneaker waves. Although the term rogue wave, meaning an unusually tall or steep wave in mid-ocean, is sometimes used as a synonym for sneaker wave. One American oceanographer distinguishes rogue waves as occurring on the ocean and sneaker waves as occurring at the shore, while the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration loosely defines rogue waves as offshore waves that are at least twice the height of surrounding waves, and sneaker waves as waves near shore that are unexpectedly and significantly larger than other waves reaching shore at the time. Scientists do not yet understand what causes sneaker waves, and their relationship to rogue waves, if any, has not been established. We meet a guy at the dock with a parrot that Dave has a connection with. He has a connection with the guy, not the bird. But I mean, well, he also seems pretty chummy with the bird too. Like, he knows already to give the bird a cigarette and seems entertained with lighting the cigarette and seeing the bird smoke. The guy, a man with an eye patch and a Jimmy Buffett concert tee, R.I.P., has a dinghy waiting for us already loaded up with supplies. It's bulbous and tubular and appears ripe under the hum of the seaside lamp. Dave seems to have bartered for this vessel, handing over a deck of smutty playing cards from the 1980s to the guy, who greedily accepts them. Then tells us the supplies are already inside and that he needs the boat back by first dawn, otherwise his, quote, ass is grass. The guy doesn't look up from his cards while saying this. Dave elbows me like, can you believe this guy? And we climb aboard. With both of us now inside, thunder crackles in the distance, almost on cue. And Dave looks out in a measured way, and then checks our aforementioned supplies, handing each item to me as he does. A heavy-duty flashlight, check. Waterproof audio recorder, check. Cheese and cracker sandwiches, double check. And finally, a sawed-off shotgun that definitely does not look legal. Dave expertly checks the chamber, sees it's loaded, and snaps the device back into place. Off my alarmed expression, Dave says, the weapon is in case of, quote, shark trouble. Sharks? I had no idea that was even going to be a thing. But I want this. I want to know more. So I tell myself I'm just overthinking this, and I remain focused on the clues ahead. I take one last look at land, at the parrot with a cigarette in his beak, now a distant pinpoint cherry glow, and began paddling.
Well, paddle, damn it, paddle! You see that storm out there? You do not want to get caught in that!
It's not lost on me that Dave has me do all the rowing. He says he's got a bad shoulder, and besides has to man the shoddy. I really wish we could have used a motor, but Dave said the noise would bring too much attention. I'm reminded how much I need to exercise, as the constant rowing motion makes my shoulder blades feel like a couple of, hot triangles. I'm that tired. I'm so tired I can't think of good metaphors or similes, or even remember the difference between a metaphor or a simile. Dave keeps his barrel aimed at the surface of the water. It's not a particularly bright evening on the Pacific, save for whatever moon glow peeps out here and there behind the clouds, which gather like rubbernecking sheep to a brewing farm fight. This is the storm. On this subject, I'm not encouraged by the fact that even though Dave claims we're outrunning the weather system, I can swear the rumbles are growing closer. And my body is growing tireder. All this to say, when Dave calls out for a break, I take it.
All right. Okay, stop here. Can you feel it? This is where she would have been that fateful night. The Queen Deborah. Barkeep would have sensed the tension in the air. Burlesque dancers in the middle of a bawdy yet tasteful number. Rich men getting richer. Poor men hoping to change his fortune. There's one guy, he's got a spot on his pants. No one else can see it, but he knows it's there. What do you want him to do? It's the nicest pair of pants he got.
Dave's zeal for this bit of local/personal history is infectious, I must admit. It helps assuage the concern that I've been Ahabbed. That is to say, roped into the obsessions of a madman. I distract myself from this worry by focusing on the striking view of the mansion that now appears before us from our newfound nautical vantage point. It's there, along the coast, standing like part of the landscape itself. A monument. A monolith. A monomyth. To look upon this grand estate is to feel its dark power, its energy, beckoning, commanding us toward it. The pull is undeniable. All else falls away. Time stops. Sound ceases. And I'm sucked into its vortex of ethereal magnetism. Me and this big house in a mind meld, existing in sync. It and I. Two poles on opposite ends being brought to the same terminus of revelation. The gravity of this structure undoubtedly drawing us in toward it. That much is certain.
Damn it! We're drifting away from the mansion!
I realize we're actually not drifting toward this mansion. Instead, the opposite is happening. We're in a riptide, being pulled further out to sea. Something the Wikipedia for sailing failed to warn me about, but I've read enough Mariner Lit to see this development for what it is. A classic case of nautical mesmerism. All that's missing is some mermaids and an albatross. It's as though I've fallen into a deep trance. I'm not sure what's come over me, but when I come to, it's like I've awoken from a slumber. Time has passed that I can't account for. Dave's been shouting at me for it seems like quite some time. When I return to my senses, I find the circumstances have drastically changed, and not in our favor. For one, the storm Dave was so sure we'd miss is nipping at our heels. No, not just nipping, flat out chomping us like human cigars. Full Groucho Marx style. Only there's nothing funny about this wet chaos we found ourselves in.
Paddle! Keep paddling!
I am paddling!
The damn thing appeared out of nowhere. It all happened so fast. Perhaps while I'd stopped paddling for a little bit to be entranced by the mansion, but I don't think so. Who's to say? Waves pummel us from every direction in what I want to say is a squall, but could also be a mini monsoon if that's a thing. There's so much I don't know. I feel foolish. I see why the beach is known as the last place of order, the last chance to impose the will of man. I get beach law. The waves swell in intensity as mouthfuls of salt water help themselves to the inside of my head, every hole I got. I try in vain to maintain our bearings, but in doing so have the paddles splash right out of my grip. I squeak and slide around the rubber dinghy like a human-sized hockey puck covered in slippery Crisco, the wretched and drenched night enveloping me and Dave. Lightning strikes, slicing through the wind-whipped chaos, and tattooed upon the night's horizon I see them. The scariest triangles I ever laid eyes on. Shark fins. Taken this evening from bad to worse. Dave screams out something, but I can't hear, and then tries to gesture at something that I think means duck as he levels the firearm, and I do just in time. But it's also devilishly bouncy at this point, so my captain not only loses his shotgun, but in so doing so, the firearm goes off, damaging our vessel. And as nuts as it sounds, at this point it ain't any of this I'm most concerned about. I'm not concerned about the shark appendages, and I'm not concerned about the shotgun. No, friends, those are friggin' party favors compared to the sheet cake from hell I see headed our way. And Dave sees it too.
Ah! Watch out! Here it comes! A big wave! Ah!
Dave! A sneaker wave, or king wave, or rogue wave, or all three, crashes down on us like Poseidon's hammer. If he has a hammer, whatever tool he has, the end of his whatever, it hits us. This sneaker king rogue wave, this big wave, has us over a barrel, or should I say, over a dinghy. Dave goes overboard, and I'm helpless against this soggy abomination that in one fell swoop has strangled history's possibly greatest friendship in the cradle. Strangled a friendship better than Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Help me, you idiot! Help!
Dave! Dave!
Oh!
Dave!
Save me!
Dave! 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 I'm alone. It's a wonder the sharks didn't eat me, and I question whether I ever saw them at all. The storm has passed, like a kid too big and rowdy for an otherwise fun bounce house that plays too hard and makes everyone cry, leaving a wake of tears. I'm bound up in the shredded remains of the dinghy, icy water enveloping us like a ruined wonton, and I, the doomed pork morsel. I disappear into the murky beyond, like a drunk mermaid after last call. My vision fades. I catch the slightest glimpse of what appears to be the mansion, and before everything goes dark, I notice that in one of the rooms, a light turns on.
We found some license flip-flops that match the description. No sign of a body. Over.
Copy. Damn it, Big Wave Dave. 3 days for my Coast Guard retirement.
That voice you're hearing? It's the reason I'm alive. It's also the reason I'm being held in beach custody. Turns out Coast Guard jail is also a real thing.
Hey, knock that off. Can't believe you're recording at a time like this. Do you understand what's happening here, son? Do you? A man is dead. Maybe up in fancy Sacramento that don't mean much. But down here in Southern California, we look after our own. Now, Dave had his share of troubles. I won't argue with you there. But for gosh sakes, show some respect and quit talking about people like they're dang collectibles.
Maybe the Coast Guard is right. Maybe in the same way Big Wave Dave got swept out to sea, claimed by that slippery rascal Poseidon, I too got swept up in my own big wave of sorts. Swept up in finding Pattersby. Did I get too addicted to the thrill? Was I blinded by my own obsession? Was I the Ahab? Maybe. So, for your listening sorrow, I present to you a brief montage of some of my favorite moments from Dave's life in the 3.5 days that we knew each other.
Hey, I got one for you. What did the ocean say to the surfer? Nothing. It just waved. Hey, you know what? We should do that thing where you bury me and give me the body of a mermaid with a huge rack. I'm talking gazongas. What do I think happens when we die? I don't know much about that, but it reminds me of a song. I think every man has 3 deaths. The first of breath, second of body, and the third in name. But, of course, what would I know? I'm just a beach lawyer, baby.
I spend the evening alone in my cell with the surviving waterproof recorder, listening to my conversations with Dave, the gregarious, shotgun-wielding stranger who became an intimidating cohort and finally a martyr for truth. I ponder how for a man with the words big wave in his name, it seems fitting, and even befitting, that that's what ended up getting him in the end. A big wave. And isn't, in a way, that what life is all about? Being coincidentally unalive by your own nickname. It is said we contain the seeds of our own destruction. And in some cases, those seeds can mean your nickname. So, my hope for you is that you check your nicknames to see if there's something in them that's gonna get you, so you can change your ways, bolster your defenses, or maybe it's a whole fate situation and there's nothing you can do about it. But in that case, just know that I'm rooting for you, and I'm sure Dave is too, wherever he is. It's morning, and still no word about Dave. Maybe he really is a goner. I can't help but feel somewhat partially responsible, perhaps, and promise myself breakfast at the beach cafe Dave talked very highly of but stopped short of recommending. Margot's Cafe. I do wonder if I should tell Dave's people what went down. Tell the palm readers. Tell the parrot owners. Or maybe in these circles, the way you update people is through bathroom graffiti at a dive bar. As a way to acknowledge their pirate-like way of life. Always living never far from the great beyond. living with the one thing that will kill them in their own nicknames, like a coiled snake hidden away in a hat box, ready to strike the second you least expect it. The second you reach for that big velveteen bowler hat in the sky. Dave's dead, dudes, in marker, for the next wobbled souse to notice in a bender's glance. Absorb briefly, then get back to their tequila sunrise, back to the peanuts on the bar floor, back to their own respective big wave hatbox snakes. With that undoubtedly poignant thought, my jailer approaches.
All right, son. You're free to go. Hey, sorry I got so worked up last night. It's my job to guard the coast from such things, you know? And thanks to you and a local crackpot, my poor sweet mistress, the sea, has claimed another soul. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not the one who deserves to be in a watery grave, and not the hundreds of people I've let drown on my watch. I knew this would happen sooner or later.
I wonder what he means by that. What do you mean by that?
Dave was always dragging folk out to that dang timeshare.
Timeshare?
Yeah, why else do you think it's only occupied seasonally? The guy couldn't stay away. I think it was a scam, hoping people would get injured on the property, and then he'd do his beach lawyer thing, which don't even get me started on that.
I tell the Coast Guard he's sorely mistaken, that the mansion wasn't just a timeshare, but a short-term rental run by a shadowy organization of literati, and that Dave had the promotional postcard to prove it. The Coast Guard stops me there and tells me he knows all about Tawny Gatherbrook, the former tenant of the mansion. And he asked me if I saw any kind of date on the postcard. I didn't. Then he shakes his head with a smirk and says, the Riders Retreat stuff, that was years ago. And he says I've been fed a lie for Dave's own nefarious purposes. Now I really feel a sinking feeling in my stomach. Was he in Davy Jones' locker not because he is trying to stop short-term beach rentals, but because of an insurance scam? Or his grandpappy's bones? Was he reeling me in like a big old fish, telling me whatever stories I wanted to hear in hopes I'd ultimately get injured on a regular timeshare property? But how could that be? There was so much evidence, so much unverified stuff he showed me. No, it couldn't be. We bonded. I felt a vibe. This was real, wasn't it? I begged the Coast Guard to help me make sense of it all.
You're the writer. You put the pieces together. But the way I saw it, that guy was like a moth drawn to a really, really bright and hot thing. And there's a reason a moth ain't got fins. That's for the fishes.
In conclusion, I wrote some commemorative graffiti in the bathroom of a place called the Coconut Hut. Informing Dave's assumed next of kin about last night from the cozy beachside cafe belonging to Margot is not the way I wanted to spend my morning, or even something that anybody asked me to do. I guess I'm just a good guy that way. Thankfully, the eatery's famous banana nut waffles, fresh rich cup of joe, and, the interesting voicemail I got from my book agent, Jourgensen Avalon, makes the events of the last few days go down somewhat easier.
Good news, Rye Guy. I sat down to read your stuff and I couldn't put it down. Overclock, as you titled it, is gonna be a hit. I already got several interested buyers, especially this place called Monomyth Publishing. Who knew you had so much steam in that freaky noggin of yours? And that Y2K stuff, oh, brilliant. This is your ticket back to the big show, my friend. I knew you'd deliver.
Next time on Finding Pattersby. Wow, Seattle, Washington, just like I pictured it. Skyscrapers and everything. Finding Pattersby is written and directed by Ryan Sandoval, with music and sound design by Erik Jourgensen. Additional music in this episode was performed by PJ Clarke, John Chavez, Thomas Mello, Brian Robinson, and Scotty Salmon. This episode featured performances by Patrick Clarke, Geoffrey Golden, and Dan Gagliardi. Check out patterspod.com and follow us on social media @patterspod for updates, announcements, and all kinds of other neat stuff. We also invite you to join Apollo Plus, and supporting them means supporting us. If you're enjoying yourself, consider leaving a review wherever you get your pods, and tell others what you like about our show. It honestly keeps our fires lit. That'd be so awesome. Until next time, see you in the thriller pages.
Want a lawyer who's big with the babes? Call 1-800-BIG-WAVE-DAVE. They can shred them corks like a tasty wave. Call 1-800-BIG-WAVE-DAVE. If you want a rad dude who knows his law, call 1-800-BIG-WAVE-DAVE. And ain't afraid to call the judge